Baby plane do 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 do. Baby plane do 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 do. Baby plane. Welcome to Beer Thunder. I'm Squish, and this is going to be the F-5AG video because the F-5AG is finally out. The event's finally over, and getting this out timely means that more people will watch it because people are probably curious about this plane. And for me, this is one of those planes it's really hard to review. This is really hard for me to say anything about it because I mean, it's exactly what you'd expect. It's an F5. It has AIM-9Ls. It has a couple of things that are a little bit different about it. A couple of things that make it unique. Like one of the things that make it unique is the Penguin anti-ship missile, and it is unique in the fact that it's called Penguin. It is not unique in the fact that the missile is basically useless. I don't even have any footage of using it because I shot it at a ship like once or twice. It basically does nothing, and that was pretty much it. The other things that are kind of unique about this plane that kind of set it apart from the other F5s, or at least some of them, is the HUD. The HUD is an F-16 HUD, but you don't get any of the gun sight, ballistic computing, anything like that. You don't get the gun funnel, so it just looks better. You just have better angle of attack indications. You do get a better RWR. You do get a higher battle rating of 11.0, but you also get AIM-9Ls. And the AIM-9Ls are really kind of the main gimmick that this plane has going for it. And when you compare it to some of the other F5s at 11.0, you're basically trading off engine power for missile capability, which is overall is a pretty reasonable trade. The F5s, even between the E and the A, they're both okay at dogfighting. They're not necessarily the best. A lot of people assume that they're the best just because they're small, but really, if you run into a MiG-23 that really wants to play the game at 11.3, that knows how to fold the wings out, you can get punished pretty severely. At the same time, I think in Sim this plane is going to be a little bit better for most people just because of the battle rating that sits at 11.0. You do get to pick and choose your down tiers, your up tiers. 11.0 to 12.0, 10.0 to 11.0 is a pretty popular tier for people that are grinding. Even without the event, you'll run into a lot of SU-25s, a lot of MiG-23s, a lot of things that, even though they're faster than you, because it's Sim, because of the visual profile of the plane being tiny and hard to detect, combined with the MiG-23 cockpit, and then kind of like other cockpits at this tier being, you know, hard to use, having limited visibility, having some bad approach angles, means that even though you're technically slow, you'll probably still get within range of people, and you will probably still be able to get kills. Like, there's a reason I don't really play this BR a lot, is because most of the time the quality of the fights that I get are just not very interesting. Like, I am front-loading all of the good fights that I've had into the front of the video just so that I can talk about them. In the first one, I was up against Yavin Dam, and I kind of went out and found this guy like 2 or 3 more times because he was like the only guy during the day that was like actually like playing the game where I'm like, hey, I can show some of the limitations of the plane as far as the maneuverability goes, because a lot of people say that the F5 is one of the most maneuverable planes in the game, and I think at this tier, especially with the A model engines, it's good. It's good for the first probably 2 to 3 turns. Your energy retention is really good around that 800, 900 kph mark, and then once you do get slow, it's not bad because you can kind of just wiggle around and be small and hard to hit, and you can kind of play against that. But you are not necessarily the absolute best dogfighter out there. I think even things like the F-4E and the MiG-21 BIS might have angles and strategies that they can use to kind of like run you out of energy. It's possible. Now, the big issue with this plane, though, is because everyone thinks that it's the best dogfighter in the world, you just, a lot of times people just gun their engine, run away, go straight to the airfield, straight to safety, and you just kind of like sit behind them and cope. And when it comes to sitting behind people and coping, the AIM-9L is really does add a good bit of utility to the plane. It really does help cover your weakness. Like, if you've watched my F-8U video, I have mentioned that, hey, the 9Ds really do dovetail into the way the plane wants to play, and kind of helps cover the weaknesses of the plane. So, with that being said, would I take this over the F-5E? Well, it's in the Swedish tech tree, so you're not really making a choice between one or the other. Personally, I say it depends on the game. It depends on, are people dogfighting? Is it a more robust game, or is it a more passive game where you have more MiG-23s running from point A to point B, just trying to fly through, shoot missiles, and then fly away? If it's the latter situation, the extra range, the all-aspect capability of the 9L is going to be better. For your average player, this plane's going to be perfectly fine. It's going to work basically just like every other F5. The guns are reasonably high velocity. They have been nerfed over the past year or so, increased drag, but that increased drag really doesn't have as big of an impact in sim, because most of your shots are a lot closer range than, say, for instance, AirRB. You're not taking those 1.2 kilometer snipes that you would be doing in AirRB. But anyways, we got a little bit of a dogfight going here. I think one of these guys is Van Dam, and you're going to kind of see that I'm going to rate, and then he's going to get his wings out, and he's going to get behind me. I'm going to juke a little bit, wander around, let him fly past me, gain a little bit of speed, get behind him, and then he's going to keep going around. Like this situation here, the vertical, I'm trying to use the vertical to get a little bit of energy so that as I go down, I can kind of disguise the fact that I'm losing speed. And I can kind of disguise the fact that long term, in a perfectly flat turn, he wins. Adding these little diagonals up and down, he can still win. He's still pretty solidly behind me. But at least I can kind of hang on now with this kind of descending spiral as I go around. And I'm basically just waiting for someone to third party him at this point. And we're going to see if that actually happens. I think he did not get third partied here. And this is where the tiny size of the F5 is actually saving me here. We cut the throttle a little bit, drop the air brake, let him overshoot. One of the things that the MiG-23s are not very good at doing is pulling a lot of AOA without wing stalling. In manual controls, you can kind of do it once, but you really got to ride the edge. He gets in front of us again. He outshoots in front, and he's just gonna start doing the same thing. He's just gonna keep going around the circle again. We're gonna play Ring Around the Rosie, and while I'm kind of sitting here at 700, I'm trying to time how much I pull so that maybe I'll see a spot where I think I can actually lose my energy, go across, get behind him, and actually manage to get a shot. I'm sitting around 500 rounds of cannon ammo, and I have 30 flares, so I am pretty safe. That's the other thing that's kind of nice about this plane, is that overall it's going to be invulnerable as far as utility value goes from up tiers and down tiers. 60 flares, 60 total countermeasures is a good amount for this tier. The missiles that you run into at 11.0 are mostly non-IRCCM missiles. The missiles that you run into at 12.0, you're still going to get Magic 2s. You'll still get some R-73s and some other random stuff on 11.7 attackers, 11.3 planes. But because the plane has a universal playstyle that works against basically everything until it just doesn't work, it means you're more or less fine. It's this kind of the same issue that in prop fighters, things like the A6M have, where, yeah, cool, you might be slow, but unless everyone's staying fast all of the time and never committing to fights and playing the game very strictly around the fact that you exist, you'll still usually find something. The one thing, though, that I don't like about this, though, is you don't have the speed presence to really force the fight on anyone else. But on the back end, you're tiny. So even if you can't chase a guy, even if you can't catch up to him, there's a high likelihood that you just kind of trail behind him, and he keeps checking over his shoulder. He's like, okay, is he gone? 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 And you just kind of make the go a little bit low, and he's like, okay, he's gone. I outran him, and he turns, and you shoot a 9L and usually catch up to him. A lot of times that works. A lot of the times when you get it into games with players that actually care, when they run away, they're going to run to the airfield and wait for the AA to start shooting and use the AA to make sure that their back end is clear. That means that small maps like Tunisia do present a little bit of a problem, a little bit of a technical challenge for you. At the same time, because this isn't a Swedish tech tree, you might be able to dovetail this in with kind of like a lineup in Sim, where maybe one of the Vigans is at the same tier, and you want to have something with speed performance that can run down your opponents, to run down the guys that are running away. Maybe you take that plane for a fly out, and then maybe if the game kind of switches to dogfighting, yeah, maybe you switch to this thing. Overall, it's a good plane. It's okay. It's nothing special. Like, if you didn't do the event and you think that you're missing out, you're not. There's half a dozen F5 variants in like every other tech tree. You have the American, 2 of them, I think. You got the F-5E in the tech tree. You got the premium F-5C. You got the event F-5A, which is an F-5C, basically same thing as this plane, but with 9Es. So it's like even worse. But also those planes are like a lower BR. So if you were really an F5 enjoyer, you have like your pick of poison for basically every day of the week of like, what do you want to play? Japan has 2 or 3 now, I think. I don't know. I forget about the Thai one, because it's the premium Thai one, which has good missiles and I think has a HUD. I think it's the F-18 style HUD, which who cares? It doesn't really matter, at least in this aspect, and probably has better RWR. I haven't really reviewed those planes. I know a lot of people really like them. I just don't like the tier, man. Like, I just don't particularly enjoy this most of the time. And after an event, because I did this, this footage is during the event, kind of like the last day, where everyone's getting their stuff. After an event, sim crash out is real. Like, if you go the day after an event's over and kind of look at the player count, look at the player base, you're like, wow, this is a ghost town. Like, wow, I can't believe all these people really went out of their way to grind this thing. And it's double-edged sword. It's either you have a player population, but the player population is grinders, or you don't have a player population, and the player population is also just grinders, but they're grinding for RP, the Refailure, whatever the new next gen F-18, SU-30, whatever the next gen top tier nonsense is going to be that everyone's going to play for 2 weeks, realize that game mode's not what they thought, did not get their DCS LARPing experience, they got too much of it too quickly, and go, nah, I'll go play like Phasmophobia or something, and go play Minecraft, because boring, sleepy. And this is what I was saying earlier, is like when you get behind a guy, he's going to run to the airfield, get the AA to clear him, bring you directly to his base, bring you directly to the SU-25. Like, this SU-25, he didn't really do anything wrong, but the MiG-23 was clearing himself, and I was like, well, why are you getting base camped? Well, you're getting base camped because your friendlies are running directly at the airfield to use the presence of the airfield to, you know, help them out. And the MiG-23ML really, it makes sense to run away if you're not experienced. It makes sense to run away if you think that the plane is basically an A6M, a 0 of this tier. But really, the MiG-23, even with the heavily nerfed, obliterated flight model, is very much better. At least in a kind of a sustained turn. But a lot of people don't know how to really take advantage of that, so I fault them because it's annoying, but I also don't fault them because like the game doesn't make it clear whether or not like running to the airfield is a good idea or not from a strictly like survival perspective, from a LARPing perspective. Yeah, whatever, it's fine. But from kind of like my perspective, I don't do it because I want to win my own fights. I want people to know that I didn't need no help. Like, I was gonna do it all on my own. I'm a big boy baby plane enjoyer. But we're gonna come up below this SU-25, and this is kind of like one of the redeeming things about this tier for newer players is there is going to be a good amount of targets where you can kind of play the game with a little bit of training wheels on. Like SU-25s, they are a skill check with some of the missiles, but you'll at least have something that you can kind of catch up to if everyone else is deciding to be like, I want to be at Mach 1.12 on the deck so I don't have to deal with F5s. You'll probably you'll find something most of the time. Speaking of finding things, one of the good things about this plane is the fact it's in the Swedish tech tree, which means that it floats around both sides of the matchmaker. It means that you have access to matches that are against USA, and you have access to matches that are against USSR. This is actually a pretty good thing, because on some days of the week, maybe everyone is playing the new USSR thing that just dropped, or is grinding the new USSR thing that just dropped, and you can't find targets. Well, you can go join the opposite side, and you can shoot at all the new people that are grinding, and vice versa. That's one of the nice things about the Swedish tech tree, the quality of life things, is you get to pick and choose your fights. You can basically decide what do you want to fight today. If you want to do like symmetrical stuff against other US players in F-5Es and F-5As and F-4s, you can do that. There are some drawbacks to that, because at this tier, a lot of planes don't have really good IFF, good radar, so you might end up eating missiles from Russian planes because they see an F5, they see it's gray, and they shoot a missile at you. That's just one of the downsides of it. And kind of like the last thing I'd like to say before I talk about how I actually play the plane and give you, like, somewhat good advice, is the stock grind for this plane was actually really good, because it comes with the missiles and it comes with the Penguin. So the two gimmicks that you want, the 9L and the funky whoop-de-doo anti-ship missile, they're already there from the get-go, and you get the full loadout because it's only 2 9Ls, 1 Penguin, that's it. So if you got the plane, it was not really worth getting because it's an F5. We're gonna have so many more F5s. They can literally do an event F5 until the heat death of the universe, because there are so many variants out there. But overall, it's gonna be a good plane. It's gonna be a good plane for newer players, especially for guys like if you just got into WarThunder, you only have props and you somehow got this plane. This is a good plane. That's a pretty reasonable introduction to jets. The guns are good. You can actually hit your targets. The plane flies pretty straightforward. There's no data management. There's no radar. You don't have to learn how to use radar missiles. You don't have to cope about how bad your cockpit is. It's just overall, it's a very, very predictable, very mediocre, run-of-the-mill, exactly what you would expect plane. It's basically, it's like getting into a Honda Accord. It's be like, well, it's a Honda Accord, and that's actually not bad. That's not bad for an event plane. I think, as far as event planes go, this is one of the more sensible options that they have done in the past, as opposed to, imagine if every event plane was something as busted as like the BI, or kind of like the Iranian F-14, because the Iranian F-14, oh boy, because of the Fakor 90s, they really, really cooked with that one. Like, I think on the marketplace, that one went up to, like, I think that's sitting around $90 to $100. It might have dropped down a little bit just because of the new tiering changes where that plane did get moved up. But, oh my God, they cooked with that one. And that's not really, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that event planes need to be these things where the fear of missing out is real. And the fear of missing out on an F5 with 9Ls at a slightly higher tier really should not be a thing. Now, as far as flying this plane, I mean, it's really straightforward. You fly low, you fly on the deck, you try to multipath the missiles when you're stock, because you don't get chaff stock. You have to unlock chaff, and a lot of the times if I do run chaff, I'm going to run probably about 10, 15 pieces, just because at this tier, 90% of the missiles that are a threat to you are going to be IR missiles, and improving kind of like your longevity in the middle of the battlefield in that aspect is a lot more important than dealing with the radar missiles. And as far as radar missiles go, really the only one that I think is really worth worrying about at this 11.3 tier is the R-24R. It really is the only missile that I'd say probably at least 50 to 60% of my deaths are from R-24Rs, either when fired from like directly above, or when I get a little bit sloppy, I get a little bit above altitude, I forget that, the missile exists, and I go, oh, oopsie daisy, I died. That happens. I mean, it is what it is. And this is also like one of those planes. I'm like, I'm not gonna go out of my way to try like, you know, super duper hard. As far as maneuverability goes, when you merge with a guy, like, look at what plane they're in, and kind of try to anticipate what they're going to do, and kind of use like previous kind of encounters to gauge it. Because although the plane's good at turning, if you make your first turn and you bleed all your speed, and the guy's strategy is to basically keep going the other direction, by the time you get around behind him and get ready to shoot a 9L, he might be too far away. So if you maintain more speed kind of for that first turn, I'm looking to basically make my first 180 degrees and be probably around that 800, 850 kph mark, because that gives me a good decision point to at least have some energy left to maneuver against the other guy, or have the ability to chase him down, or get in behind him. And then when you're chasing guys, like, just go below and behind them. Like the MiG-23s, a lot of these 1960s planes, they have like this like reclined cockpit where they're kind of direct to the rear, over the shoulder visibility is abysmal. So you can just sit in the blind spot, wait for them to turn around, shoot a missile, or you just get close and you win. Same thing with when you're flying around the map. Use the map when you hear people hit the cover me call. You basically fly towards the cover me call and start looking for wingtip vortices, because the only planes that produce wingtip vortices in sim are player controlled. And this plane, because of the guns, because of how aimable it is kind of the ultimate third-party mobile. Like this guy here, we got a MiG-23 fighting an A-10. We went to a cover call, and we just kind of sat off in the distance, shot a 9L, and most of the kills that you get in this plane are going to probably be from the 9Ls. The 9L at 11.3, 11.0, down to 10.0 now, because this will have a day where 10.0 to 11.0's fight, is a very, very strong missile. It is very strong, even on things like the A-10. And this plane is a lot better than an A-10. It's a lot better from a utility perspective, because you're tiny. You sneak in a lot better. You're also effectively twice the speed. Maybe if you consider the A-10 to be a 700 kph plane, well, you got 300 kph on them, which means when you shoot the 9L, it's going to go a good bit further. Same thing with head-on aspect. Now, as far as not wasting the missiles, if I know that the guy knows that I'm there, I'm not really going to use the missile right away. The missiles are really good, but like this instance here, this guy was already shooting at me. If I shoot the missile, he sees the smoke trail, drops like 3 or 4 flares, and then the missile's gone, and it was pointless. But we maneuver, we get behind him, we're sitting around 750, and we're solidly behind him. And because we saved some of our energy, even if he saved some of his, if he had gone up, because of the position, we would still probably end up getting this kill. And the thing is, this tier, very, very good for kind of training wheels tier, because a lot of the guys don't have a lot of experience. They don't have kind of the refinement necessary. And planes like the MiG-23, yeah, they're better. Strictly speaking, they are better. They're faster, they accelerate better, they turn better. Their angle of attack is not as good. The Gussie is terrible. Having to use wing sweep to 0% and trying to get like the maximum amount of performance out of the plane at all times, though, is a lot harder. This plane, you just kind of like fly around, look for dots, pull back, and then start blasting. That really is all there is to it. Like the F-5s, like if you watched an AirRB review for an F-5 and an AirSim review for an F-5, they play basically identically. And the only thing that makes the Sim one better is that the fact that there's no markers means that other players have to be really cognizant of where you are and just kind of your presence. And because you're tiny, most of the time they don't know. Even when I play the MiG-23 in my MiG-23 video, more often than not, one of the things that was the bane of my existence was the random F-5 just teleporting in directly behind me, because it flew past and didn't see it, or he cut off the angle, he saw me way before I saw him, and I was like, oh, my plane just exploded from a missile. And that's what you're going to do with this plane, is you're just going to kind of slot in behind people who don't see you, shoot the missile, and then they're going to explode. which is nice. It's fine for the guys that are against it. I think there might be a point where you get too many F5s in a game, and trying to run away from all of them at once could be awful. But even kind of like, as I said earlier, sim crash out is real after events, and I have not seen nearly as many F-5AGs past this event as I did like the F-14 Iranian one. Like the F-14 Iranian one, as soon as that event was done, whole entire lobby is just basically grinding to get that thing. Like people really wanted that thing. This thing, if you didn't get it, you didn't really miss out. If you did get it, it's a good addition to the Swedish tech tree, and if you didn't sacrifice your mental health to do it, and overall, it's one of the planes of all time. Anyways, that's WarThunder.